"You're not part of our family," my father said. 15 years later, they came to my house with suitcases and fake hugs. I poured myself a cup of coffee, put on my grandmother's ring, and told security to let them in. Just not into the house. Into the waiting room. I opened the door of my house for 8 figures in Atletterton. There they stood. Like a family commercial, only without the smiles and retouching. Mother, father, brother, and sister. The people who 15 years ago threw me out of their lives like I'd stained their white tablecloth. And now they're standing on my doorstep like they're here for Sunday dinner. Except I changed the menu a long time ago. And the place at the table is no longer for them. They didn't say anything at first. They stood there with faces that tried to portray something between anxiety and remorse. I didn't say anything either. Because, to be honest, for the first couple of seconds I just enjoyed this theater of the absurd. Then of course my mother couldn't take it anymore. She began in that voice that always had something of the morality lecture and passive aggression in one bottle. We decided it was time to talk. Family is forever. An interesting twist, considering that forever ended for me the day of my grandmother's funeral. I opened the door wider. Not because I forgave them. I just wanted them to finally enter the room where it all began and ended. My father, Gerald, went in first. The same one who thought I had a place in the house reserved for real children. Next was Martha, my mother, who loved her children to the core. They weren't me, of course. Behind her was my brother Ted. Ever since he got out of college, he's still as beautifully silent. And closing the procession is Valerie, the sister, with the usual half-smile she uses when she's about to say something particularly mean. I watched this procession and thought, I wonder if any of them realize how late they've come. When we sat down in the living room, no one knew where to start. So we started with a lie. "We've been watching you, Al. We're proud of what you've done," Dad said, looking over my head. "We are?" I raised an eyebrow. "I wondered if you were proud when you sent me the Don't Call Me Again letter. Or when Valerie published posts about imposters stealing the family name." Pause. Neither one moved. Only Valerie pretended to look at the vase. "It's all in the past," Ted mumbled, as if we were discussing forgotten debts. And now you're in the present, where you're suddenly interested in my success. Especially when you came asking for $2 million. And there it was, the first crack in their facade. Mother tried to grin. It came out like a man who chews a lemon thinking it's a peach. "We're not here for money. We're here for reconciliation." Oh, come on. Reconciliation? The same people who canceled my 10th birthday party because Ted had a soccer game? The ones who didn't show up for their diploma defense because Valerie had a photo shoot? I said. Reconciliation. With a calculator. I stood up, walked over to the bookcase. There, among the awards and diplomas, I had a scrapbook. The one with the fragments of my childhood. The key word is fragments. Because there was never a whole. I opened the first page. A photo from the garden. I'm standing on the side. Because Valerie's in the center with the bow. Next is Thanksgiving. I'm in the background. Because someone had to take the picture. Another one is Ted's birthday. Cake candles crowd. My birthday? Oh, the one that got canceled. There's only a picture of Grandma Edith, who brought me a piece of cake that night and said, "You don't have to be one of them to be you." I put the album on the table. You came to me because you ran out of resources. So you've decided I'm your backup bank. The problem is that my ATM doesn't require a PIN, it requires a conscience. Valerie snorted. You were always the dramatic one. I turned to her. And you're the predictable one. A pause. No one laughed. Although I would have framed the joke. Dad stood up, staring sternly like I was still the girl who didn't deserve his attention. We gave you a home. We raised you. And you ran away. That's the truth. You gave me a roof. And a list of demands. And when Grandma died, you said I was not part of the blood, therefore not part of the family. Was that a concern too? Or just a convenient point in a sentence where I didn't fit in? They sat in silence. Even Valerie stopped feigning sour pride. I went to the door. You have 5 minutes to decide if you want an honest conversation or a complaint show. If the former, I'll be back. If the latter, the door is right there. And I left the room. In the kitchen, I poured water and remembered how one day at school they forgot to pick me up after class. I sat on the steps for an hour, 2 hours, And then Grandma Edith came, wearing a coat 2 sizes too big and carrying a thermos of cocoa. "Sometimes, Al," she said, "family are the ones who remember you're there." There was someone whispering outside the door. I heard a name. Mine. The tone was not conciliatory, more like annoyed. I smiled. Sarcastic. Because nothing changes. But this time it was me who was going to change. I remembered how, when I was 15, I came home with a diploma for winning the Olympiad. My mother put it on the shelf, and a day later she put it away in a drawer because it clutters the interior. That's when I realized, no metal will penetrate the armor in which they hide from recognizing someone else's success. And yes, sometimes I caught myself thinking that I wanted them to come. To see. But not for pride. But to let them know I wasn't a mistake. I was their chance to do better. And they blew it. Now they're here. Not because they need me. It's because they couldn't do it themselves. They wanted someone else's warmth when their own went out. I wonder if things were going well, would I be their shadow again? Or would I just disappear from the horizon like before? I went back into the room. Everyone was silent, like children caught in the act. They were waiting for me to say, "Okay, let's forget it." But I didn't have amnesia. I had my memory. And the files. Except this is a different scene. When I turned 18, I didn't get a card or a phone call from them. Not even a smiley face on Messenger if any of them knew how to use it. Just my grandmother. She brought a cake with the wrong inscription because the baker had gotten the name mixed up. But it was the only cake that didn't have a made-up indifference on it. I sat with her then on the veranda and listened to her talk about her youth, how she'd run away from Iowa with one bag and the idea that love is a choice. Not a blood obligation, not tradition, not "it's the way it's done." It's a choice. A clear, conscious choice. Then I thought that if one person in my life made that choice in my favor, I wasn't completely alone. And so it was. Every time I was turned down for an interview, every time my resume wasn't accepted, I heard her voice inside. "You don't have to be comfortable with them." It was louder than any of their silence. Now I looked at these people sitting on my couch and thought, you wanted to be there for them when everything was already built. But you didn't hold the ladder when I was climbing. It's a shame that success doesn't make some people proud. Only appetite. In the morning, I sat in the kitchen, staring at my cup of coffee as if it might hold some answers. No one was around, everyone was either asleep or pretending to be asleep. It was one of those rare moments of silence when you could hear yourself. And what I heard wasn't exactly to my liking. There was a kind of pinched, animalistic sense of déjà vu, like it had happened before. Only before I was on the other side of the door. No millions. No walls. No protection. I remember that day all too well. When Grandma was hospitalized, I tried to be there for her. Martha didn't want me to go. She said, "It's crowded in there without you." It was convenient. It was always convenient for them not to see me. And when Grandma died, everything fell into place. The funeral was cold, like the family itself. Dad stood next to the pastor, snatched the farewell paper from me and said, "You're not one of us. Not blood. Not family." That was it. The mother remained silent. The brother turned away. Valerie rolled her eyes. And that same night, an envelope was handed to me. And signed. Inside was $5,000 and my grandmother's ring. An old ruby ring. With a note that said, "If you have to choose, choose yourself." I put it all in my bag and never came back. Not because I wanted to run away. It was because staying was worse. I arrived in San Francisco late at night. The hostel had 6 bunks, the smell of other people's feet, and 1 outlet per room. A cracked laptop in my hands and one question in my head. Can I do it? There was no answer. But there was a job. First as a bartender. Then tech support. Then both. I studied at night between shifts. I ate noodles and coffee with a rolled-up hoodie for a pillow. One time I passed out in the kitchen. Just passed out. 2 hours on a cold floor. No one noticed. And in the morning back to the bar. And back to the code. I read everything I could. Forums, documentation, security blogs. At some point I started to know more than my boss. And that's when I got fired. Because I was creating tension. I almost gave up. I almost did. Until one day I overheard 2 men in a bar. One was saying, "We're screwing up the client data." The other was saying, "We should find someone who can fix it cheap." So I went over and I said, "I can do it." They laughed. Then they gave me access. 12 hours later, I closed the vulnerability and sent them a report. 18 hours later, I got an email from Tom Montague. He was a venture capitalist. And he said, "If you're not lying, I want to have coffee with you." I wasn't lying. We met at a little cafe. I came with a laptop and a presentation written in PowerPoint on a free license. He listened to it. Then he said, "Okay. Here's 200,000 for you. Show me you're not a fluke." I put together a team of 2 equally half-asleep IT guys. We worked out of a friend's garage. It smelled of dust, sweat, and cheap chips. But after a month, the first client showed up. 2 months later, 3 more. I answered phones, wrote code, maintained documentation, fixed bugs. All by myself. I was CEO, CTO, and janitor. The company was called Tracewall. We did corporate defense. Someone leaked the data? We're your shield. Someone's messing with the API? We're your firewall. I was good at being needed. I've had that since I was a kid. First money I spent on rent. Second money on chairs. The third was for a lawyer. Then we won a hackathon. Then we were featured in a 30 Under 30 magazine. Somebody asked, "Where are you from?" I said, "From nowhere." But now I'm here. When the big investment started, I felt fear for the first time. Not because I was afraid of losing. It was because it was embarrassing to be alone. People came with their families. I brought my laptop. At my first corporate event, I sat in the corner. No one knew I was the founder. Too silent. Too wary. Too not like everyone else. Tom said, "You have to learn to delegate." I replied, "I spent 20 years delegating everything I felt like doing. Now I want to do it myself." He didn't argue. When we opened the Palo Alto office, I put a picture of my grandmother on the desk. Underneath it was a sign that said, "Family is a choice." But even when things were starting to work out, I caught myself waiting. For what? Maybe a phone call. Maybe a letter. Maybe one sentence. We were wrong. It never came. And that's when I realized I'm not getting revenge. I'm just living. Without them. I bought a house. A big one with floor-to-ceiling windows. So there'd be room for air. And silence that no one else can take away. The first night I didn't sleep. I just walked around and thought, this is it. A world where I don't have to hide. And then the doorbell rang. And it started all over again. I haven't counted how many times in the first year everything went to hell. One time the server went down. Another time, a client blamed us for a failure we didn't commit. I wrote explanatory notes, sent logs, called lawyers. Sometimes it seemed easier to sweep the bar floor again than to keep the company afloat. When the first article appeared in the press, I saw my name and I couldn't believe it. Because all my life it's been the last name on the list. And then it was the headline. The next morning I got an email from someone I once worked with in tech support. "You've changed. You're one of them now." I didn't even know who they were. The ones who had achieved. Or the ones who stopped apologizing. I tried to build some sort of support inside of me. No pillars. Without the usual, maybe I was wrong. I went to therapy. Not to forgive someone. It was to stop them from living in my head for free. One time I brought to a session a drawing my grandmother had given me as a child, a house, a tree, and a girl. The psychologist asked, "Where is the family?" I replied, "Behind the scenes." They didn't fit into the format. We moved into a new office. I made the walls white. No portraits, no awards. Just one mirror. So that everyone who went in there could see themselves. No icons. Not idols. Myself. It was my little revolution against a family where mirrors were only used to correct the facade. One night I came home later than usual. Sat down in silence. I picked up a letter my grandmother had written to me shortly before she died. It began, "You're not a backup player." And in that moment I was suddenly relieved. Because I wasn't waiting for someone else's whistle anymore. I was playing by my own rules. I signed our first contract for over $1 million in old shoes that chafed my heels and a jacket off someone else's shoulder. The clients thought I was an assistant. I didn't mind. What mattered was the contract. Not the title. But even then I had my breakdowns. One time I locked myself in the conference room after a bad pitch. I sat on the floor and thought, what if they were right? Maybe I'm just not that breed. And then I heard the guard's voice outside the door. Are you okay, Ms. L? It was the warmest I'd heard in a long time. I came back this morning. No pathos. No inspiration. Just because I didn't want to start from scratch again. Because everything I'd built was too precious to give it away to those who never believed in my yes. And yes, I didn't forgive. I just moved on. I invited them into my office. Not because I wanted to hear an apology. It was because I was tired of carrying those files around inside my head. Let them look now. Let them listen. Let them try to swallow without gagging. They went in one at a time. Valerie went in first, of course. As if she was afraid she'd miss the moment when she could be the center of attention again. Martha followed, her shoulders slightly hunched, as if she'd come not to talk but to bury her own conscience. Ted dragged along behind, looking as if he were late for his lunch break. Gerald was last. Still the same. Rugged. Straight. Empty. I put an old box on the table. An archive. Photos, letters, printouts. Their words. Their ignoring. Their contempt. Black and white on paper. You can't erase it. It's all your story. Not mine. I just put it together so you wouldn't forget, I said. They were silent. For a minute. 2. Then the mother spoke. Quietly. With sugar and venom. Elle, you've always been sensitive. Maybe too sensitive. We didn't mean any harm. We just didn't know what to do with you. That's odd, I replied. With Valerie you knew somehow. With Ted too. Or did they have a built-in tutorial and I was going without a manual? Silence. Only breathing. Someone tapping their fingers nervously on the armrest. Ted. Listen, he finally says. We were wrong. It happens. But this is different now. We want to be a family. It took you 15 years to realize I'm not a bank account? Valerie rolled her eyes. It's just like old times. You're being dramatic. You've always done it. You took offense that you didn't get to speak at the funeral. Really? I looked at her. I wasn't offended. I realized. I get that you have your own frame of reference. Where I'm not a person but an inconvenience. I pulled the printout. Her social media post from 5 years ago. Some people just don't know how to respect a last name they're accidentally given. You accidentally wrote that? Valerie didn't say anything. She just looked away. Martha looked at me like I was punching her in the gut. Oh, you don't have to remember everything. We're here. We're together. You were together, even when Dad said I wasn't their blood. You were together when I was cut out of the will. You were together when I left and no one asked where I slept. And now you're together again because you feel bad. Gerald stood up. Put his palms on the table. We're not going to make excuses. But you have no right to say we didn't raise you. You didn't raise me. You pushed me out. Like luggage that was accidentally delivered to the wrong address. I got up. I went to the safe. I took out a folder. Here's a formal proposal. I've set up a fund in Edith's name. It will cover your children's education. Your nephews. They have a chance to grow up in a world where they won't be divided into real and extra. And us? Mother asked. You don't. I don't have to save those who once watched me drown and held a rock on a rope. The silence grew thick. Ted whispered. We really didn't know it hurt like that. Because we didn't want to know. I stepped out into the hallway. Left the door open. On purpose. So I wouldn't have to slam it. It wasn't a scandal. It was a cleansing. Later when they left I didn't cry. I just sat on the veranda and pulled out the letter. The same one my grandmother had written to me when I was 18. Family isn't the ones who gave you a name. It's the ones who know yours. I reread it. I breathed in. And for the first time I really exhaled. That evening, I invited those who had become my family into the house. Lena, who used to be a waitress and now runs my customer service department. Jared, the boy I mentored. Tom was there too. We ate pasta, drank wine, laughed. No politics. No protocol. Just people. Who chose to be there for each other. I looked at them and I realized. I wasn't abandoned. I was set free. And yes, I didn't get revenge. I was set free. When I was alone after they left, I didn't need a mirror to realize how much I had changed. Before I would have doubted. Rethinking. Tried to be understood. Now I didn't. I didn't need permission to feel. I went out into the garden. The breeze moved the bushes and everything felt like when I was a child. Only there it was the yard behind the school, where they kicked me out if I got in the way. Here it was my garden, my place, my choice. When we launched the foundation, I insisted that the bylaws include the phrase, "Funding does not extend to relatives of the applicant." The lawyers were surprised. I didn't explain. I just signed it. I remembered how once in 5th grade I got a B and my father said, "We expected more from you." At the time I thought the "we" was the army. Now I realize, it was a lone voice of disappointment disguised as collective guilt. It's funny, but after they left, I went through the house and collected all the things that had anything to do with them. Even old photos I'd kept just in case. I took them out to the garage, then the archives. Not because I wanted to forget, because I didn't want to explain to myself why I kept them around anymore. Sometimes people think forgiveness is weakness. But when you choose not to seek revenge but to let go, that's not weakness. It's control. I didn't feel victory. It wasn't a triumph. It was a closing of the account. No interest. No bonuses. Just no longer a customer. I got a letter from one of my nephews a month later. He said he wanted to be an engineer. That he'd seen an article about me on the internet and wanted to do something similar someday. I wrote back. I didn't say much. Just, if you have to choose, choose yourself. And that's probably it. I had a dinner for Christmas. No candles, no stuffing. No people who thought they were the main characters in someone else's life. Instead, those who were there for me when I started from scratch. We ate pizza, talked about kids, projects, silly things. There was laughter. And no one asked, "What's Dad going to say?" At one point, Jared stood up and said, "Thank you for being you." And I had to look away because I wasn't ready for that kind of simplicity. Honesty isn't a rant. It's when a person stays, even when it doesn't benefit him. After dinner I went outside. I looked at the house, the light in the windows, and for the first time I said out loud, "I'm home," without looking back. No commas. When you live a long life waiting for other people's approval, it's hard to know where they end and you begin. But as I stood on that veranda, alone with a glass of wine and air in my lungs, I knew for sure. I am not their continuation. I am my beginning. Family is not drama. Not blood ties. Not duty. Family is being seen. And stay. I started leaving myself notes. Not tasks, not goals. But thoughts. A kind of internal journal. Today I didn't apologize for taking up space in a conversation. Or, I refuse to explain why I don't communicate with my family. Because I don't have to. These little things are like anchors. They hold on when old loyalties want to drag you back in. I once found an anonymous note in my mailbox. There were only 3 words. "You broke everything." Before I would have cried. Now I laughed. Because yes, I broke it. The illusion. The comfort. False stability. But in return I built the truth. And it's holding up better.